This is a slab of gray shale from northeastern China. Pressed into it is a small animal about the length of your forearm lying on its side with its tail curled over its back. It died 125 million years ago. Around the spine and along the whole length of the tail, there is a dark halo, a fringe of fine filaments preserved in the rock, and we know what color they were. Dinosaurs held the land for 160 million years. That is longer than any group of animals has held anything. It is roughly 800 times longer than our own species has existed. And almost everything you picture when you hear the word is wrong, including the two most basic things about them: how they got there and whether they ever left. This is before us, the history of the world before anyone was here to see it. The date is 232 million years ago, and the animals that are about to define the next 160 million years are, at this moment, a minor component of somebody else's ecosystem. And hold on to that color. We are going to come back to it, and what it turns out to be is going to tell you what feathers were actually for. Walk into a late Triassic landscape and look for a dinosaur, and you will have to look hard. The ground is dry and red. There is a river somewhere ahead, and everything is arranged around it. Stands of horsetails along the margin, seed ferns further back, bare soil between them. There is no grass anywhere. There are no flowers. Neither has been invented. The animals in front of you are archosaurs, but they are on the other branch of the family, the crocodile line. They are not crocodiles. Some of them stand upright on long legs and run. Some are low and heavily armored. Some are 4 meters of predator with a skull built like a bear trap. And wherever they occur, they are the top carnivore. There are more kinds of them than there are of dinosaurs. They are more abundant. They occupy more body plans. And somewhere in the same landscape, usually near the bottom of the specimen counts, there are dinosaurs. In most late Triassic faunas, they make up less than 5% of the fossils. Look again, low down, at the edge of the frame. Something small and bipedal moving quickly between the seed ferns keeping to cover. That is the dinosaur. Now before we go any further, I want something from you. You already know why dinosaurs took over. They were better built, legs underneath the body instead of sprawled out to the sides. More efficient lungs, faster growth. Put that in the comments now so you can see where you started. I will come back to it. And the case is a good one. A dinosaur carries its legs directly beneath its body, which is a more efficient way to move than the sprawling posture of most reptiles. Many of them had air sacs connected to the lungs, the same system birds use today, which pulls oxygen out of the air on both the inhale and the exhale. Bone structure suggests many of them grew fast, closer to the rate of a bird or a mammal than a lizard. Put those together and you have an animal that can travel further on less food in a hot, dry, unpredictable world. It is a clean argument, and it has been the standard explanation for most of a century. The takeover itself is not in doubt. By the middle of the Norian, dinosaurs are no longer a rounding error. In some faunas in Europe, South America, and Southern Africa, they make up as much as 90% of the specimens. From there, the land belongs to them, and it will for the next 135 million years. Something changed. The question is what? So there it is, the first answer. Dinosaurs were better engineered than their rivals. They outcompeted them through the Triassic. And when the dust settled, they were the ones left standing. But there is a problem with that story, and it is in the timing. If dinosaurs were steadily outcompeting the crocodile line archosaurs, you would expect to be able to watch it happen. Dinosaur numbers rising gradually, rival numbers falling gradually, over millions of years. That is not what the rock shows. For roughly the first 13 million years of their existence, dinosaurs do almost nothing. They are present, they are rare, and they are not gaining. Then, across a very short interval, they are everywhere. In 2018, Massimo Bernardi, Michael Benton, and their colleagues dated that interval precisely using something better than bones. They used footprints. The Dolomites in northern Italy preserve a sequence of tracks in rock that can be dated far more tightly than most fossil-bearing formations. In that sequence, dinosaur footprints appear suddenly at one specific level. That level corresponds to something called the Carnian pluvial episode. Between 234 and 232 million years ago, the global climate flipped, from arid to persistently humid, and then back to arid again. Plant communities were rebuilt, a third of marine genera disappeared, and on land, several groups of large plant-eating animals went extinct. The dinosaurs did not defeat them. The dinosaurs moved into the space they left. And then it happens again. 31 million years later, at the end of the Triassic, another mass extinction removes most of what was left of the competition. The crocodile-line archosaurs that had dominated every landscape for tens of millions of years are reduced to a handful of survivors. The dinosaurs come through it. So the 160 million years does not begin with a victory. It begins with two accidents, 30 million years apart, and a group of animals that happen to be standing in the right place both times. That leaves a different question. Not how they got there, but what they were actually like once they were. And for 135 years, that was a question about bones. To answer that, you need somewhere that soft tissue survives. There are very few. In the 1990s, farmers in Liaoning province in northeastern China began splitting slabs of fine lake shale and finding animals inside them. Not just bones, outlines, skin, stomach contents. The deposit is about 125 million years old. It formed where volcanic ash fell repeatedly into still, oxygen-starved lake water, which buries a body quickly and then leaves it alone. In 1996, one of those slabs contained a small predatory dinosaur with a dark fringe running along its back and down its tail. It was named Sinosauropteryx, and it ended an argument that had been running for 135 years. In 1861, a fossil came out of a limestone quarry in Bavaria with feathers around it, and a skeleton that looked like a small predatory dinosaur. Teeth in the jaws, claws on the hand, a long bony tail, Archaeopteryx. The resemblance was noticed almost immediately, and then, for most of a century, it was set aside. It came back in 1969, when John Ostrom described a dinosaur called Deinonychus and catalogued how many features of its skeleton matched those of birds: the wrist, the shoulder, the hollow bones. But that was still an argument about bones, and an argument about bones can always be argued with. Sinosauropteryx was not an argument about bones. After that, the finds came steadily. Simple filaments on animals nowhere near the bird line, branched structures, then true veined feathers, the complex kind, with a central shaft and barbs locked together, on animals with no capacity for flight at all. Then feathers on the arms and the legs of the same animal. Then feathers preserved well enough to see the internal structure. By the middle of the 2000s, the question had stopped being whether some dinosaurs had feathers. It had become how far down the family tree feathers went. So that is the second answer, and it is the one most people carry. Feathers evolved in small predatory dinosaurs. They got longer and more complex. They became useful for gliding and eventually for powered flight. And that is where birds come from. It is a clean story. It runs in one direction, and the direction is the problem. Because feathers do not appear on animals that were about to fly, they appear on animals that could not possibly have flown. Sinosauropteryx has a simple filamentous covering and a body with no flight potential whatsoever. So do a range of others. And veined feathers, the complex kind, turn up on animals with short arms and heavy bodies that were never going anywhere near the air, which means feathers are not a flight adaptation that birds inherited. They are something else that flight was later built out of. And there is a further possibility which is genuinely contested, and I want to be careful about how I put it. In 2019, a team led by Zixiao Yang and Maria McNamara examined two specimens of a small pterosaur. A pterosaur is not a dinosaur. It is a flying reptile on a neighboring branch of the family. They reported 4 types of filament on those specimens, including bilaterally branched structures previously considered unique to one group of dinosaurs. If those are feathers, then feathers did not originate in dinosaurs at all. They originated in the common ancestor of pterosaurs and dinosaurs roughly 80 million years earlier than anyone had proposed. That would mean something startling. Dinosaurs started out feathered, and the scaly ones lost it. This is not settled. In 2020, David Unwin and David Martel argued in the same journal that the branching is an artifact of preservation. Structural fibers from the wing membrane decayed and unraveled. The argument has run back and forth ever since, with new specimens on both sides. Here, scientists genuinely disagree, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. But either way, the direction of the old story is wrong. Feathers came first. Flight came a very long time afterwards. So what were they for? The answer came from a technique that nobody expected to work. For most of the history of paleontology, color was the one thing everyone agreed was gone. Pigment is organic, it decays. You can reconstruct a skeleton, a posture, a diet, a gait, but not a color. Which means every dinosaur you have ever seen, in every book and on every screen, was colored by an artist making a reasonable guess. Greens, grays, browns. The colors of large reptiles, because large reptiles were the only reference available. Then people started looking at fossil feathers under an electron microscope and finding structures inside them. Submicron bodies packed in rows along the filament. In living birds, the same structures exist. They are called melanosomes, and they are the containers that hold melanin. And their shape correlates with the color they produce. Rod-shaped melanosomes carry eumelanin, which produces blacks and grays. Roughly spherical melanosomes carry pheomelanin, which produces reddish browns, ginger. So, if the melanosomes survive and you can measure their shape and you know where on the body they came from, you can reconstruct a pattern. It is not complete. Yellows and blues in living birds come from other pigments and from structural effects in the feather itself, and those do not survive in a form we can read. There are colors this method simply cannot see, but it can see enough. In 2010, two papers came out a week apart. One of them, led by Quango Li, sampled melanosomes from 29 separate points across the body of a small feathered dinosaur called Anchiornis, about 30 centimeters long, from the late Jurassic of China. The reconstruction that came out of it was not subtle. A gray body, long feathers on both the arms and the legs, white tipped with black, and on top of the head, a crest of reddish orange. That is not camouflage. That is not insulation. That is a display animal. An animal 30 centimeters long in the late Jurassic was already signaling, which means that whatever else feathers were doing by then, one of the things they were doing was carrying information to another animal's eye. Now go back to that slab from Liaoning. The other paper, led by Fu Chengjiang and Michael Benton, sampled the filaments of Sinosauropteryx. The melanosomes were the spherical kind. The animal was ginger, and the pattern was not uniform. The tail was banded, alternating rings of ginger and pale along its entire length. A later study, led by Fian Smithwick, went further. It found that the dark coloring extended across the face in a band around the eyes like the mask on a raccoon, and that the animal was counter-shaded, dark on top, pale underneath. Counter-shading is a camouflage strategy, and the sharpness of the transition tells you about the light the animal lived in. The transition on Sinosauropteryx is sharp. That is what you get in open habitat, in strong, direct light, not forest. So, a small ginger predator with a striped tail and a banded mask hunting in the open. So what were feathers for? Look at what the evidence shows, in order. The oldest simple filaments are on animals that could not fly, and in at least one contested case, on animals that are not dinosaurs. The first complex veined feathers are on animals that could not fly. And the first function we can demonstrate those feathers performing, the first one we can read directly off a fossil rather than infer from a shape, is being seen. Ginger and pale bands, a dark mask across the eyes, counter-shading matched to open ground, a reddish crest on the top of a head. Flight is not the beginning of this story. Flight is something that happened once, to one lineage, tens of millions of years after feathers already existed. The first job of a feather was to be looked at. And one of those lineages is still here. This is the part that people know and somehow still do not quite believe. Birds are not descended from dinosaurs the way we are descended from something ape-like. Birds are dinosaurs. It is the same relationship that makes you a mammal. Not a descendant of mammals, a member of the group. Every anatomical definition of Dinosauria that works includes them. The wishbone is a dinosaur bone. The air sacs are a dinosaur respiratory system. The feathers are a dinosaur covering that predates flight by tens of millions of years. And then there is the number. There are roughly 11,000 living species of birds. There are roughly 6,400 living species of mammals. There are more species of dinosaur alive on this planet today than there are species of mammal. They are smaller than they were, and most of them fly, and they have beaks instead of teeth, but they have the wishbone and the air sacs and the feathers that were already there 80 million years before anything used them to leave the ground. We call the last 66 million years the age of mammals. That is a naming convention, and it was made by mammals. By species count, it has been the age of dinosaurs the entire time. There is one outside your window. If this is the kind of thing you want more of, slow, careful, and honest about what we do not know, the like button genuinely helps this channel find people like you. And the answer you wrote down at the start, better built. Every part of that is true. Legs beneath the body, efficient lungs, fast growth. It is just not why they were there. Being well built is what let them take the opening. It is not what made the opening. And the opening closes on an ordinary afternoon 66 million years ago when an object about 10 kilometers across arrives in shallow water off what is now the Yucatan Peninsula. The question is not what happened. Everyone knows what happened. The question is why some things came through it and others did not. That is where we go next.